Video number four. So finally touching into nutrition. Probably would be good to start why the hell we left it so far out of everything, because all you hear is you can't outwork your diet, others are created in kitchens, this and that. And whilst you can downsize yourself easily by just eating less and whatnot, we are talking about being physically more superior than you were before instead of just smaller, and actually feed yourself for performance, which is completely useless if you start with nutrition and haven't taken care of training and then haven't taken care of training.
Yeah,
Basically,
I would say that probably the reason that people expect diet to like change everything is because that's what they're told. Hey, if you change your diet, you're gonna lose. And I'm not saying that doesn't work. What I'm saying is it depends on the environment that you're introducing the food into. So food acts differently if depending on who you give it to. So the same food will affect somebody else completely different because their internal environment and realistically their environment as a whole, where they live, what time they get up, how their routine is, all of that changes how food acts. So everything that we've talked about from the first episode till now, if you start doing those first, then you start worrying about nutrition. Then you know that whatever you do with your nutrition is going to be implemented into the right conditions of your body. That's very important, and a lot of people forget that. You know how food gets turned, like how, okay, I eat whatever, right? How does that turn into me moving my hand and walking around and thinking, right? And it's literally a chemical reaction. And if you know even a little bit about chemical reactions, is the environment changes the reaction, right? So if the temperature is different, if the humidity is different, all of that stuff changes what happens, even though you've put the same ingredients in the bottle, right? Well, it's no different than your body. Your body will changes how things are used depending on the environment. A very easy one is, okay, if you eat something, doesn't matter what it is, and your heart rate is really high, you're probably not going to utilize those things appropriately for the next several hours until your heart rate comes back down. The digestion process and the utilization process got changed simply by where your heart rate was. So doing things like being aerobically fit and making sure that, hey, when I'm resting, my heart rate is super low. That means whenever you eat anything, you're going to be very efficient at processing that food. And if you teach your body, it's the wrong word, but if you teach your body well, I'll say it this way, if you teach your body to handle fats and carbohydrates, when you are at rest, your body will predominantly start to utilize fat for whatever you're doing at that time.
and this is a great kind of walking into that is following up from previous video where like people kind of misunderstand that you need to have that physiology preset before you're having all these nutritional strategies kicking in and actually giving you benefit. And this is why we often hear people, yeah, I don't really function well on high carbs or high fats or this and that. But it's because your physiology is different from the said other person, because this person might be giving you a great advice, but it's fits for them because their physiology is completely different. This is why
Yes,
we went through these steps. Hey, if you do all this, you will be in much better stage to actually get the most benefits out of your nutritional strategies now. Whereas at the beginning, if you start with your nutrition, you don't even know if it's going to work for you because your body is not just ready for what you're trying to do with it.
yeah, and it could lead to self-sabotage, right? So it's like, hey, you got really good advice, you're doing what you should be doing, tracking your calories, keeping, carbs low or high, depending on whatever diet you're using, and it's not working, right? And so then it becomes demoralizing, and then you either start binging or you do something different, and say you go keto, for just as an example. It doesn't mean anything is wrong with keto. It just means, oh, I'm going to go low carb. You go low carb, you start feeling like crap, your workouts go to shit, and you're just not utilizing that type of fuel correctly, and then it affects everything else, right? Whereas if you go backwards, right, and hey, since we know that things are going to act differently depending on your internal structure, let's start getting those fixed first, so that when you add something or change your diet, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is working and I actually do feel pretty good. And it's actually motivating, right? It's self-fulfilling. Hey, this is
Yeah.
working. I'm going to stay on. Because you and I both know, honestly, the hardest part of like being, taking your body beyond where it is currently or whatever is nutrition, because that's something that you can mess up every single day for the whole time you're awake, right? So, especially if you're traveling or a very busy person, it's really, really hard to be like, hey, I'm going to stay on track. But if you're motivated, right, because you can clearly see the benefits of what's going on, it's way, way easier. Like 9 times out of 10, if you're somebody that's like, oh, hey, if I eat this way, I feel good. Guess what? You're going to eat that way way more often than if it's like, hey, I got to force myself to eat like this because it's supposed to be good, but I actually kind of feel not really that great. It's really easy to be like, I'm not really going to do that today, and just skip it. And one day turns into 2 days and 3 days, etc. So, yeah, setting up your physiology big time helps with adherence when you start changing diet protocols.
Absolutely. So when people go with high fats, which is probably the most popular approach when everyone wants to get leaner or whatever, a lot of people will feel benefits, but it's probably because they are not ready yet to utilize carbs for fuel. Muscle mass is not there. Insulin sensitivity is a bit off. Uh, Probably also mindset, because all you hear is carbs are bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that plays a role into that. Yeah, that plays a role into that. And then the next thing that I would say there is, um, I mean, realistically speaking, let's just go back to what we stated before, which is we want to be aerobically fit. The reasons for that is so that you can utilize fuel and provide enough oxygen for all the chemical processes in your body at an accelerate or at an appropriate rate. And then what that also lets you do, and we'll take it a next step further. Then we talked about, when your workouts need to be very coherent with a proper warm up and all this stuff. And the point of the workout is to really expand your heart rate capabilities and your ability to function with a high heart rate. And then the opposite with the aerobic work, the whole point of that is to get you so fit that when you're resting, your heart rate's really low. So you're getting this contrast of, hey, when I'm active, I'm able to produce a lot of energy and my heart rate can go really high and I don't feel like I'm having a panic attack or dying, right? And I'm not out of breath. So that means that you're very fit in the sense of activity. And then because you do your aerobic work, when you're resting, your heart rate is the exact opposite. Blood pressure is low, heart rate is low, etc. So you have these two paradigms of, hey, around training or around activity, I can be crazy active, starting with your cardiovascular system, and the opposite when you're resting. That sets you up so that you can actually eat kind of however the hell you want, as long as you adhere to a couple rules that are kind of like training wheels when you first start getting really fit, which is this. In the morning, if you're somebody who trains, let's just say middle of the day-ish, right? Anywhere from 11 a.m. to 2 or 3, 4 p.m. Okay, you're somebody that trains around there. You kind of set yourself up to be like, hey, my breakfast can literally be high fat, low carb. It can literally be kind of keto version, because you're going to be resting. Your heart rate's going to be low and all of that stuff. You're going to be doing your computer work, etc. And then as your training window comes up, you naturally are going to get hot and sweaty. We touched on this a little bit, where it's like, hey, if you try to keep things kind of at first like very scheduled, very regular, your body kind of starts taking over and starts prompting you to do things. Even if you miss a training session, you're like, oh man, I feel jittery, I feel like I need to do something. And then you look at your watch and you're like, wow, actually I kind of work out at this time all the time. So what that starts doing is that sets up a window in the middle of the day where now you can eat a lot of carbohydrates and utilize them because your body is ready for them. That's the changes physiologically that are happening inside. Your hormones for activity are raised. Noradrenaline, adrenaline, those types of things start getting spouted off. And now when you introduce carbohydrates into that environment, it becomes like a almost like having an energy drink, except for it's through food, right? You're like, oh, adding fuel to the fire of all those hormones. And then after your training window, if you've ate plenty, then you can basically go back to low carb. So you have this thing where it's like in the morning and in the day, you can not eat carbs. So you can eat higher fats, like typical breakfast foods, eggs and bacon and that sort of stuff. And then in the middle of the day, you can literally flip the switch the other way around and be like, hey, I'm going to eat, 3 or 4 bagels and whatever, and jam and bread or whatever, right? Yeah, and then and those will all be processed correctly because your physiology is operating correctly, right?
And
So
this is another point why people should be aware that even if you eat same calories as a other person, you're not going to get same results because your lifestyle is not the same.
correct. Yep. And not only that, as your own lifestyle changes, you have to be able to recognize that. And it's not like your lifestyle is going to change month to month. It really doesn't. Like, I don't care how busy or how active and crazy your schedule is. You have a lot more routine than you give yourself credit for. Even if you're somebody who travels a lot, you're pretty much the same for months at a time as far as how your daily, like when you wake up and when you feel active and when you feel tired, those are pretty even, right? And so you start dialing into that and start feeding yourself appropriate to those windows like I just talked about, and you will get different. So for example, that paradigm where it's like, hey, I'm going to eat high fat, low carb in the morning, and in the middle of the day, kind of where I'm way more active or I have a training session or whatever, I'm going to eat a whole lot more carbohydrates. You can literally double or triple calorie intake one versus the other at the time of day, and they're going to act very similar. You're going to use a lot of those carbohydrates or a lot of those fats if your body is set up appropriately. Even though calories, like on a calculator, it's like, oh man, he should have stored a whole lot of body fat because, he ate, 100 grams of fat, in the morning, and then he ate 300 or 400 grams of carbohydrates in the middle of the day. If anybody looked at that, they're like, well, how does that jive? And he doesn't get fat, right? Or something along those lines. Again, the calories are useful as a measuring stick. That's all it is, right? So think of it like, hey, you have a gas tank, but this gas tank uses 2 fuels, but the gas tank still has a constraint to it. Like it's only this big, right?
Yeah.
It's not like 5 times bigger. So calories are useful to get you to understand how much to eat as far as like volume of food, but they're not useful at all in telling you what to eat or how much of those different constituents.
So when you go into nutrition, what is the order of importance when you break it down and kind of you see these pyramids all over the place? Carbs this and then veggies this and fruits that and whatever else. So for anyone who has gone through the process of basic like setup of their body, we are talking someone who's already gone through those 3 steps, because for someone who hasn't, it's going to be a completely different story. If
Yeah.
somebody is like really out of shape, can't breathe, even ties their shoelaces down and whatnot, don't even train, this would be irrelevant. So we are talking about someone who's gone through all those steps. Their heart rate is good, their recovery is good, their health markers are all top shape. They are training every day or every other day or whatever there is. So what would be order of sequence, order of importance to set up a good starting plan for nutrition?
Yeah. So first, I would say the very first thing that we want to kick off the box that you're consistently getting in, no matter what's going on, is micronutrients for sure. Now, people get, there's apps out there that track all your micronutrients and things of that nature. And for the most part, unless you're an elite athlete or something like that, you're not going to be too worried about tracking them specifically. As long as you meet some minimum criteria of you're getting 3 different vegetables per day, just from a variety standpoint, so that you know that you're getting a broad spectrum of micronutrients. And then I go as far as I want to double your body weight in grams. So if your body weight in pounds is 150 pounds, you're going to want to eat 300 grams of cooked vegetables for the day. I don't, but now again, we're talking the setup is correct, right? This person is bioenergetically operating correctly. So in that case, it doesn't really matter where they get put, but I tend to tell people put the vegetables at the times of the day where you are kind of relaxing or more or less not being active. So for most people, for sure, that's in the evening, right? Most people try to relax in the evening and kind of have dinner with their family and whatever. I'm like, put the bulk of your vegetables there. Whatever you can't get down out of that total amount, that 300 grams, then put that at the next appropriate time of the day where you're kind of semi-active. So for most people, especially if they have a day job, that's usually around lunchtime, right? They're either in meetings or they're just kind of, taking a break from their day job or whatever. So it's a not too stressful time of day. So that's also an appropriate time because vegetables do take a little bit longer to digest and stuff like that. So you want your heart rate to be low when you consume them to make the most use out of them, right? So that's why you pick those times a day. After that, then it comes down to getting enough protein to meet the needs of your lean muscle mass. So again, I try to aim body weight in pounds, try to meet that or as close to it in grams of protein. I do go out of my way to say, if you're going to use shakes or protein bars, limit those as much as possible to 1 or 2 servings if you're a large individual per day.
And know the quality of them as well.
Yeah.
If you buy some protein mixtures without amino acid profile on a label, you don't even know what you're getting anymore.
Yeah, that is true. So yeah, I go out of my way to tell them, hey, look at the ingredient list on the thing, even if it doesn't have an amino acid profile. If the first ingredient in that list is not whey protein, it's something else.
Yeah.
Skip that brand. Just go to somewhere else because it should be the very first ingredient. It's that simple. If it's not whey protein, preferably whey protein isolate, so that you don't run into issues with digestion and stuff like that, because it causes issues for some people. So
and this is also some things that can be even taken back a little bit where you were talking about veg intake. It's not just micronutrients, it's also your gut health. You need fiber.
Yes.
We go to toilet afterwards. If you don't
have
a decent stool, you're not going to absorb food properly.
Yep. And more and more, there isn't enough study on this, but there will be hopefully more, is that some of that fiber feeds your bacteria that does a lot of the digestion, right? So if you're not feeding that correctly, how is this supposed to do its job, right? So if you're missing the vegetable intake from everything that it brings, not just the micronutrients, like you said, the fiber, the soluble fiber and insoluble fiber, and all of the other stuff that it does in your gut with things that aren't even related exactly to your body, right? Your microbiome, then you're already starting off on the wrong foot if you're missing that. But that's why I put it first, right? It's like, hey, get this in. If you get this in consistently, you're going to be way ahead of most people by a long ways.
And it's usually the hardest one to get in because you kind of have to get it fresh. I prefer to do kind of micronutrient smoothies, at least on the rest days, for everyone I work with, because I know that you're not going to sit there and do fresh salad every single day. And you can buy these frozen packs, for micronutrient smoothies, just throw it in and just drink that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great way around it. So frozen vegetables and fruits for making a smoothie, those are perfect, especially spinach, right? You can put it in anything and it doesn't taste like anything. Another one that I like is canned canned vegetables. So like just canned spinach, that's canned fresh, right at the farm, right? So it's literally as fresh as it gets, and they've sealed it in a can for you. I'm like, and there's some debate on whether the can adds things or whatever. I'm like, I'm not so worried about that, especially if you're not even getting vegetables, right? I'm more worried about you getting some vegetables in, even if there's a little extra salt in it or whatever, right? So yeah, so the frozen stuff for making smoothies and even cooking it, right? It makes it easy because it'll never go bad. That's the problem with eating fresh vegetables. If you're not somebody who's enjoys vegetables a lot, right? They'll go bad and then you have to throw it away, and then you're like, man, I don't want to buy that again and waste my money, etc. Right? So frozen and canned will go a long way in keeping you on track, because if you forget one day, no big deal. Your produce didn't go bad, right? Just start the next day. So yeah, that's definitely a good point there.
So veggies, high quality protein.
Yep. And then once you've met those two requirements, then that's when we start going, okay, how are we going to fill the rest of your calories? And that's where we determine, that's where calories start to become useful. It's like, okay, how much more do we need? And it's never going to be exact. See, too many people put, hey, I'm going to eat 2,100 calories exactly every single day. I'm like, cool, that's fine. But if you do that, you're going to see different results on different days. Even if you manage to keep 2,100 calories static for 8, 10, 12, 14 days straight, you will see different results on different days because of what I just spoke about at the beginning, which is your body processes things differently depending on your energetics. So then you start to be able to play around because you're already in shape, right? This is the prerequisite to all of this, is now you can go, okay, in the morning, I'm going to eat some of my vegetables, or even have a smoothie, right? Whatever you end up deciding. And I'm going to go a little bit higher fat, and I'm going to limit my carbs a little bit. And we'll just literally see how that person feels. Most people in the morning are going to feel pretty damn good like that, because what ends up happening is your stomach doesn't get super full because there isn't a lot of volume with high fat foods. And you actually end up digesting it pretty good because you're relaxed. And so next thing you know, you're like, I actually feel really good. I feel energetic, etc. And then as the day goes on and you have had more activity or are about to have more activity, you start to notice you're like, man, I just don't have that pop in my step, right? Like that, like I want to go run or jump or whatever, right? I feel fine, but I don't really have that energetic feel like if I were to drink a sugary drink. And that's your body giving you a cue of, hey, you're about to become active. We need fuel that's a little bit faster running, something along those lines, and this isn't 100% like scientific jargon. This is just cues for you to be paying attention, right? And then you go, oh, okay, I'm going to have some carbohydrates now. So instead of, and we want those carbohydrates to be digested fairly quickly. So we lower our fat intake, raise our carbohydrate intake. And we probably don't need to worry about vegetables if you did your job to get some vegetables earlier that day. And so that could literally look like, I'm going to have some grits. So my favorite is grits because they digest really quick. So I'll have some grits with, some chicken on the side or beef on the side, or, this would be appropriate if I'm going to go work out. I'll have some grits with some high quality protein powder in it. And just for flavor, I will bias towards some frozen some frozen fruits, to add sweetness and more micronutrients and fiber, right? So keeping the forefront of my head, why am I eating vegetables? For fiber, for micronutrients. Well, what other is a good substitute, but it brings carbohydrates? Fruits, right? So in the middle of the day when I want more carbohydrates, but I still want to have some micronutrients and really bump up my carbohydrate intake, fruits are excellent for the middle of the day if you're somebody that's active in the middle of the day. So fruits, high quality carbohydrates with some high quality protein, you eat that, and after like 30 minutes, it's pretty much digested because your stomach wasn't super full from the morning, right? And again, this is talking to people of normal size. This starts to get a little bit different with people that are very large, that need to eat a lot of food. That's a whole different thing. We're talking to.
I find also that this meal is usually the easiest one to mess up because you're going to go somewhere. You don't want to walk around with meals prepared, whatever. And to stop somewhere and get something that's higher in carbs, have a high quality protein in it, and no fat, becomes a bit problematic.
It does. It does. And so my default for traveling actually is like places like Subway, because you can control what goes on the bread. You can
Yeah,
control what goes in the inside, right? You know the bread has a little bit of fat.
yeah,
That's pretty much every bread, but it's going to be dominant in carbohydrates. So that kind of eliminates having a good quality carbohydrate. Then you go, okay, I'm going to add some good quality meat to it. So I'll add some chicken breast to it, or I'll add, whatever your flavor, ham or whatever. And that's going to bring a little bit of fat also. But again, you have the choice. You can choose steak, or you can choose chicken, right? And
yeah.
and if you just kind of do a little bit of math, you go, okay, I'll choose the chicken because I want to keep my fats low, and then I'll throw in some vegetables for taste, and I'll get some micronutrients, and I'll skip some of the high fat sauces. I'll use a high sugar sauce, like a barbecue sauce, instead
Yeah.
of a mayo, right? So I those places are for traveling are godsends for this meal, right? Because now you are in control. And that really goes for any type of travel. Any place where you can dictate what goes into your food is always a place I will choose over something that's prepackaged.
And again, this is for people who are physiologically fit and healthy and don't
Yes.
suffer with issues like with insulin sensitivity and all those kind of things, because then it becomes a completely different thing. This is why
Yes.
it's extremely important to know that nutritional strategy is designed for you, not something you copy from your favorite trainer or your friend or magazine or just read somewhere on the internet. It needs to be kind of said that this is going to work. You have tried and tested it before, and that's another great example, that tracking your food and knowing what's happening for a few weeks before you start implementing these strategies when you travel, to
Right.
make sure that this works and it doesn't make you like crash, like some people would just eat a bit of carbs and they just feel horrible afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. So you eat this meal that's a higher carb, lower fat. You pay attention to how it digests. Does it bloat me? Does it digest really quickly? What you'll find, if everything's appropriate and you are actually very active in the middle of the day, you find that it digests very quickly. You find that you don't have like an energy crash 45 minutes later or anything like that. You actually are like, wow, I feel really good. I feel like I should be moving, right? That's the whole point of it. Because you are active, you fueled it with more carbohydrates. Now it's like, okay, now let's go have a workout, or go be active for the middle of the day. Maybe you're somebody who goes for a long walk in the middle of the day for your lunch break or something like that, or gets a quick gym session in, right? I know people that, hey, the only time I can get into the gym is actually on my lunch break. So they'll go and hit a quick gym session. Well, you eat the carbohydrates 30 minutes before, you go to the gym session, you crush your gym session, you come back, and you're not going to feel tired. You're actually going to be
Yeah.
pretty energized and feel really well. And then that kind of fuels you into the afternoon. By the time the afternoon comes, you will start to feel a little bit more down, a little bit more depressed. That's a good thing, because you were active, because you fueled all that, and now your body's going to shift into what it needs to do next, which is to recover, right, from what you just did. So then you go, okay, this is an appropriate time. My heart rate is low. I'm supposed to be recovering. What's going to fuel that even further? Well, let's have more micronutrient dense food. Let's add the other side of our vegetables that we haven't ate to that meal, and some high quality protein. And I don't really need carbohydrates at that point in time, because I'm actually supposed to be winding down for the evening, right?
Yeah.
So then that's an appropriate time to have like a steak and veggie type of meal, right? You eat a high quality steak, you have some high quality vegetables, and you eat basically until you're full with that, and your body's going to process that a lot better than if it becomes a pasta dinner, right? That's going to be not that, like, don't get me wrong, the pasta dinner is going to taste fantastic, but it's not appropriate for that time of day, because next thing you know, if you ever done this at night, a pasta dinner for most people causes upset stomach, maybe acid reflux. It's because your body's trying to process all these carbohydrates, but you're actually in a state that's not appropriate for a lot of carbohydrates,
Yeah.
right? So knowing the state of your body is big time. And
This is why it's important to not only track what you eat but how you feel, which a lot of
yes,
people never do. They just track their calories and that's as far as they go, uh, which is it kind of came from all these people trying to do well, but at the same time, these studies that come out, they are not made on people who are extremely physically active. Like I've done studies myself, and I had given people who have been in gym 4 years, and I had to class them as elite athletes. There is nothing elite about them. They don't even know how to train yet. 4 years
Right.
is absolutely nothing.
Yeah, well, especially if those 4 years consisted of just going in there and following somebody else's workout
Yeah,
or just whatever you wanted to do, right? Like, I'm not saying those people aren't active, but they might be underperforming, or like we stated in the previous videos, they don't have a proper aerobic system. So now they don't handle fats very well, right?
yeah.
Or they actually don't train
That's
that
something
well.
that can be possible even if you've been in gym for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, yeah,
How many
yeah.
people do we see? We walk in a gym and you're like, you shouldn't be doing that. You haven't even taken care of basics.
Yeah, yeah,
And
or they've been training for 15 years. Their heart rate's always through the roof. Their blood pressure is a little bit high all the time, and they're like, "Man, I just survive on carbs because it's the only thing I can digest well, right?"
yeah,
And it's like, well,
yeah,
yeah, that makes sense because
yeah,
you feed a whole bunch. Excuse me, you feed a whole bunch of fat into a system that's high revving all the time. Think of it that way, right? Your heart rate and your blood pressure are like pseudo accelerator pedals. If the accelerator pedal is always pushed down a little bit, well, you're running out of fuel very quickly and
mm,
always needing to replenish it. And the only thing that's going to like chase that down as far as speed going into the system is going to be carbohydrates, not fats. But if you start to tune your body up a little bit, now you can start to handle both fuels a little bit better. And there are other circumstances that we'll probably get into later where it's like, hey, we start adding in PEDs and stuff like that. That changes everything again, right?
yeah.
So
And
you
something
have
we talked about previously is that when you get your physiology set, everything becomes easier. You don't need to force feed yourself to grow muscle, and so on and so forth. Just because the energy cost is now far lower because you're much more efficient at what you do. Not
yeah,
even
and
in the gym, but your digestion as well.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And what you said there is very, very important. The whole point of everything that I just talked about, as far as like, hey, when your heart rate is low, try to bias more towards a little bit more fat, a little less carbs. When your heart rate is high, go the other way. All of that is to improve efficiency so that your body pays less tax, right? If you pay
Yeah,
less tax, you end up with more income. It's that simple on whatever you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to lose body fat, you're going to be able to lose body fat a little bit faster. If you're trying to gain muscle, you're going to be able to gain muscle a little bit faster.
and less
All of
stress.
those, yes, because you're paying less tax. Literally, you're paying the cost to survive and to do the thing that you want is costing you less when you're not fighting your body or when your body is set up correctly and you're feeding with the flows of your body.
Absolutely. And that's a massive distinction to make when people go and say, I want to grow muscle, but I don't want to do too much cardio because I just want to grow faster. And you're like, no, 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 no.
Yeah. Especially if you're not in shape to begin with, right? Then it's like
Yeah.
you're literally fighting your own body, right? And I'm
Mm.
not saying, that you won't grow any muscle. I'm just saying it's going to be slower than it could be, right? It's
Yeah.
going to be less
Slower,
efficient.
less efficient, more expensive, uh, far more stressful.
Mhm.
And it just snowballs down from there because then you start talking about people who have better genetics and whatever else. And when you're like, no, they just took care of the basics and anyone can do that. When they stop looking at only highlights of their favorite fitness person, but actually ask them what you have done. Like Andy Bolton is a great example. Best deadlifter on the planet, first person to lift over 1,000 pounds. He used to do a lot of sprinting.
Yeah.
And you would look at him, 160, 170 kilos body weight. How the hell do you sprint? He didn't sprint when he did that. He was doing a lot of sprinting before he transitioned into powerlifting. So his cardiovascular health was through the roof. That's why he could train the way he trained. And he's still maintaining that physio, like cardiovascular health now. He does bike every single day and all sorts. So It's extremely
Yeah.
important for anyone who wants to gain muscle quicker. Not that how much calories you eat and how much protein you take, but how many do you actually absorb? How many of those nutrients your body can actually take in and kind of break it down in amino acids and rebuild in a tissue. If that's something that your body is not efficient at and your cardiovascular health is very poor, it's going to take just 10 times more times than you could have actually achieved in other circumstances.
Yeah, and just to kind of to follow that a little bit further, what you just stated there, that's what's happening, in layman's terms, as far as, hey, I'm consuming this protein, I'm breaking protein down when I exercise, and really the rest of the time, like all the time, your body's always breaking down protein. But theoretically, let's just say, hey, I work out, I break down some protein in my bicep, I want to rebuild it as quickly as possible so that I can train it again and make it bigger and bigger. That process takes energy, right? So it takes the building block, the protein, but it also takes the workers, your immune system, energy to do that, right? Now, which one makes more sense? Carbohydrates that can be digested in 3 or 4 hours, right, and be completely used up as far as like the energy they yield, even though you have a period of time when you sleep for like 8 or 9 hours where you're not going to be eating anything, right? So it's like, okay, well, I better get pretty damn good at providing energy with fat. Now, everybody can burn fat, like, and just like you said, anybody can do this. It's just making the system more efficient so that, hey, now I can burn fat even when I'm awake and I'm eating, as long as my heart rate is low. And I'm burning fat not in the sense of losing body fat, but burning fat in the sense of providing energy for every process that's going on in my body, including the rebuilding of this bicep that I want to get bigger, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And then if you're wanting to get leaner, you're already predisposed to burning body fat. So now when you reduce your calories, it's like, oh, we'll just use our own body fat to fuel some of these processes. By default, you get a little leaner, but you don't lose any muscle. You actually end up building a little bit more muscle. And that can be exaggerated depending on the training and the PEDs and all of that other stuff, right? But even as a completely natural, not taking anything, if you get this system down, you become efficient at staying leaner while building muscle tissue. And that can be, juggled basically as long as you want to keep doing it.
So in a few words, how would you describe everything that kind of we just discussed in a sense of, hey, these are the things that you need to look out for, and if you're going to take care of these, as long as you have done the basic stuff we talked about in previous videos, you're going to get the best possible results there are.
Yeah. So, everybody wants to have like an actual number or something to go by or whatever, but unfortunately we won't be able to do exact, and it never is exact for all the reason we just talked.
Yeah.
But you take your body weight, great starting point, like I mentioned, double that in cooked grams of vegetables, try to get that during the day. And then your body weight in pounds, try to get as close to that in grams of protein. And then the rest of that is going to be the calories. And the calories are going to be, for the most part, for average people, you're going to be somewhere around the 22 to 2,500 calorie mark. What that really means is this. If you try to get 4 meals in that fill you up, that are whole foods, and you have the basics, I put some vegetables on here, I put some protein on here, now I fill it with some fats or some carbs that are appropriate to your appetite, that is a perfect starting point to start getting these measurements of how do you feel when you eat a certain way.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add there?
No, not really. I think that's a great starting point, and probably next time we can touch into micronutrients and anything else that can be added to all this. So, and as always, thanks for your time. So, we'll do another video next week.
Awesome.